Welcome to Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour.
Hello and welcome to Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour, founder of Ghabour Law. Joe is a personal injury attorney licensed in New Jersey, New York, and Florida, who has represented accident victims and their families for nearly 2 decades. He's known for giving clients straight answers in plain English. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what really matters in those first few hours and days after a car crash in New Jersey. Joe, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm excited to learn more about you. Let's start there. I'd love to if you could share a little about your background, what led you to focus on helping injured people through personal injury law, and just kind of a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing for going on to 23 years now, and personal injury law kind of found me, to be honest with you. So when I was in law school, my third year of law school, I interned at a personal injury firm in Manhattan, and I saw firsthand how a single crash can literally rip somebody's life apart, not just physically, but financially and emotionally as well. A lot of times they go from very stable, lives to something that is just, out of a horror movie. What really pushed me was watching people get taken advantage of by insurance companies when they were at their most vulnerable. Um, I developed a very strong dislike for insurance companies, specifically as to how they treat people. So even people who have a legal obligation to protect their insureds and to have a legal obligation to act in good faith, a lot of times they do bare minimum and they don't do what they're supposed to do to protect their insureds. So I decided I wanted to be the person standing between the injured and the insurance companies, kind of to level the playing field, if you will. So my work is about protecting people's rights, restoring their stability, and making sure they're treated fairly and with proper dignity.
I like that. That's great, Joe. So let's start at the scene of a crash. Like, what do you tell people they need to think about like right away, even before they have left the roadway or exchanged information? Of course, assuming that they're able to.
Well, when I talk to people about auto accidents in general, I start before the crash, and that's what their insurance policy. But we'll get to that in a minute. But the first thing I tell to people that are involved in an accident: make sure you're in a safe location. Don't get out of your car unless it's safe to do so, because you can get struck by another vehicle. You can slip, and another car can strike you. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you can be further injured. Call 911. If you think you're injured, make sure that the EMTs check you out at the scene. If you suspect that your injuries are severe, your neck or back severely hurt you, try not to move so that you don't cause further damage. If you're able to, please take photos of the location of the accident, your vehicle, the damage, skid marks, the surrounding areas, the other drivers, whatever information you're able to capture, do so, because information is that's what we're going to rely on in case you want to litigate the matter. Of course, exchange information with the other drivers, but that's what you should do. What you shouldn't do is admit fault. Even if you are at fault, do not admit fault. Do not argue with the other drivers. Do not say, I'm sorry. Even if you feel it, do not say it. Just make it about the facts and only the facts, because that's going to help us, be able to evaluate the matter clearly.
Yeah, do people, I mean, obviously it's a stressful situation, right? It's like, your emotions are running, your adrenaline is pumping, there's all this stuff going on. Do people sometimes not even realize that they're hurt?
Well, sometimes it takes a few days for the pain to actually manifest itself. A lot of
Sure.
times during an accident, there's a lot of adrenaline going on, so you don't feel anything till you go home and you rest a little bit, and then the adrenaline starts to go down, and all of a sudden you start feeling the pain, whether it's in your neck, in your arms, your shoulders, whatever the case may be. A lot of times it does take a few days for it to manifest fully.
hmm So after that initial chaos, should you, even if someone is just kind of like, I'm a little sore, do you always recommend that they see a doctor?
Well, the truth of the matter is, if you were involved in an accident, even if it was a low speed accident, the car stopped moving, the body doesn't. Even
Right.
if you have your seatbelt on, it's still going to pull you back. So there could be damage even from very, very low speed accidents. So You should get checked out. If you feel anything is amiss, go get checked out. God forbid you have any internal bleeding or anything of that nature, or a fractured vertebrae or something that could be very serious if you don't handle right away. So always get checked out. Of course, that's aside from the fact that you want to, preserve your right in the event that you want to seek compensation if your injuries are severe. So make sure you're okay. If you don't go to the emergency room, you can go to an urgent care facility, ideally within 24 to 48 hours. And of course, any medical treatment rendered must be documented by the doctors. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. And is how important is that police report?
Well, the police report is actually hearsay. We can't admit it into court unless the police officer who wrote it comes to court to testify. So you take it with a grain of salt. The police report really is, what the police officer observed at the scene or what the other parties or both parties have told him at the scene. So, sometimes it's very clear that the police officer was on site and he saw the accident happen. Well, that's very good evidence. Sometimes the police officer will say driver one stated X, Y, and Z, driver two stated X, Y, and Z, and that's the end of
And
that.
that's it.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't really help much sometimes, but it gives us a baseline as to where to start from.
So, how soon should someone contact an attorney?
Well, I always recommend, you have a conversation with an attorney. At the very least, you get to understand what your rights are, what your obligations are. This is something that I do for a living, day in and day out. I deal with insurance companies, I deal with police reports, I deal with insurance declaration sheets. The average person does not. The average person doesn't know what's contained in his or her auto policy. The average person does not know how to proceed with getting compensation if they're seriously injured. So it doesn't hurt to contact a lawyer as soon as possible. Um, Myself and many other personal injury attorneys, our fees are based upon what we're able to obtain for you, whether through settlement or verdict. So it costs you absolutely nothing to consult with us, whether it's me or anybody else that does personal injury law, so that you can at least understand what your rights are.
Okay. And so someone retains you. You meet with them. You get their sort of the lay of the land and all that. What are you doing first? How does the beginning of the case unfold for you?
Well, the first thing we do is obviously we collect all the information, the police report, the photos, if there's any witnesses. We also ask for any videos from the scene, if there's dash cam footage. We look at the location of the scene to see if there's outside video cameras that could have captured the accident as well. And we also ask for the insurance declaration sheet for the person who's contacting us. And the reason we do that, and this is something that often throws a curveball to people, is they ask me, why do you need my insurance? The other guy's at fault. Well, New Jersey, New York, Florida, a whole bunch of states are no fault states, which basically means that irrespective of who's at fault, your auto insurance will cover your medical treatment up to the limits that you've chosen, subject to your deductible and your copay. So the first things we do is we evaluate the entire, police report itself, and we look at the evidence and we look at the insurance so that at least we let our client know this is how much money your insurance company is going to cover for your medical treatment. This is your initial responsibility, your deductible. This is your copayment going forward, so that they have an idea as to what their out-of-pocket exposure is going to be for their medical expenses, and also so that they understand how much the insurance company is obligated to pay. In New Jersey, the minimum limit for PIP or personal injury protection is 15,000. There's 15,000, there's 50,000, there's 75,000, there's 150,000, and then there's 250,000, which up until, years ago, that used to be the standard, the 250, but then the insurance companies, to basically try to reduce the rates for people, I guess pushed forward with the legislature to have them pass a law that basically allowed for lesser PIP coverage. Not a good idea to have less PIP coverage because, again, 15,000, you go to the emergency room, you do an MRI, CAT scan, and you're pretty much exhausted on the 15,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say 15 is nothing this day and age.
It's not. I mean, Florida's 10,000. I mean, so it varies. New York is 50. That's the minimum. New Jersey, unfortunately, trying to keep costs down, I think it's counterproductive. Honestly, 15,000 doesn't really cover much. And if you're seriously injured, who's going to pay for the rest of your medical treatment, especially if the other driver doesn't have a good policy as well.
Hmm. Yeah, what happens if that other driver is at fault and maybe they have no insurance or they just have really, really minimal coverage?
Well, the other driver, okay, so two things that we have to prove in any case. You have to prove who's liable, and then you got to show the damages. So, liability, generally, you can show it by looking at how the accident happened. If the other driver was cited for, careless driving or any other moving violation, that's usually a good indicator of who's at fault. In terms of damages, basically you have to show what your injuries were and what your treatment was and what your diagnosis was and what your prognosis is going to be and whether you're going to have future medical expenses that you have to account for. In New Jersey, for example, the minimum liability limits are $25,000 per person, $50,000 per accident, and $25,000 for property damage. That's the minimum. If you own property, if you have assets, obviously never a good idea to go with the minimum. You should get as much insurance as you could afford to protect your assets. But if the other driver has a $25,000 policy, and your injuries are worth more, then we can tap into what's called underinsured motorist coverage. Or if the person doesn't have insurance at all, then we can go through what's called uninsured motorist coverage, up to the limit that you yourself, as the person who is injured, has chosen in your policy, so that they will cover instead of that other driver's insurance or in excess of that other driver's insurance. Of course, if you have a $25,000 policy and the other driver has a $25,000 policy, all you're getting maximum result from that accident is $25,000, because you can't stack each other. You can only go up to the maximum that you have on your underinsured motorist coverage. So it's very important to make sure you have enough coverage, you have sufficiency of coverage, because if you don't, ultimately, if you get seriously injured, you may walk away with nothing as a result, especially if you have outstanding medical bills.
Does the driver have any recourse in a situation where they got into an accident, it wasn't their fault, the other driver has very minimal insurance? Are there, if they exhaust their underinsured, do they have other options to get some stuff covered?
Well, they can sue the person aside from the insurance, but more often than not, the person doesn't have assets,
Yeah.
or what we consider judgment proof.
Yeah, you
So
can't sue someone. I mean, you could sue them, but it doesn't mean you're going to get paid.
you're not going to get water out of a rock, exactly. And so ultimately, if that person doesn't have assets, you're not going to get more than what you've gotten from the insurance policies, and that's the sad part of how the insurance system works.
What I know that adjusters will call pretty quickly after a crash and make some offers, try to get people to sign things. Can you talk about that process and what people really need to look out for?
Right. So there are always two adjusters involved. The adjuster that represents you as the policyholder, and then the adjuster that represents the defendant's policy. They could be from different companies. They could be from the same companies. It doesn't really matter, but understand that they're two different people. So the one who's calling you on behalf of your policy is usually going to be your no-fault adjuster, your PIP adjuster, who handles your medical treatment. You have an obligation to talk to that person because you have a contract with the insurance company. You pay the premium, they provide you with coverage. Part of that contract requires you to cooperate with them in investigation of any claim. So you have to speak with that person. They are technically on your side, and I say technically because they're the ones who approve the medical treatment. So be careful of what you say and how you say it. So if you're fine, that's fine, not a problem. But if you say you're fine, but your neck hurts you, and then you go to the doctor, and the doctor tries to get approval for neck treatment, they're going to say, no, I spoke with him 3 days after the accident, and he said he was fine, so we're not approving the neck treatment. If you're injured, you're injured. You have to be truthful. You can't lie. That's fraud. That's not acceptable. But choose your words wisely.
Mm-hmm.
You have pain. I have pain. If your hand goes numb once a day, make sure you say that your hand goes numb once a day, or whatever the case may be. Now, the other adjuster for the defendant, you have absolutely no obligation to speak with them. There is no contract there. Nothing good can come out of your conversation with the defendant's adjuster other than him or her taking down your information and then using it against you at a later time. This is not a criminal case, but the Miranda warning still applies, in my opinion. And anything you say can and will be used against you at a later time. So you don't have to speak with the defendant's insurance adjuster. A lot of times they're like, oh, we need to take a statement. No, you don't. You refer them to your attorney. You just say, I'm represented by counsel. Here's my attorney's information. And that's it. No further conversation so that they don't use it against you later on.
So what happened? What about if you haven't secured an attorney yet when that call comes through? Do you still recommend just don't talk to him?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing good can come of you having a conversation with the defendant's adjuster.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And, you brought up an interesting point too about just you might, if you have any lingering pain, take it seriously, because a lot of us, I think, are like, oh, it's fine. I'll just, I'll walk it off. I'll be all right. It's not a big deal. I think it's just one of those things. I don't feel like dealing with it all. I'll be good. I'll do some extra stretches. I'll take some Advil. But that's not a smart way to be, because that can really burn you later.
Absolutely. A lot of people will just take, Advil or ibuprofen over the counter, or some painkillers, and say, I'll be fine. And they mask the symptoms really, instead of actually going to the doctor to see what's going on. And again, it's a process. The doctor is not going to look at you and say, oh, you have X, Y, and Z. He's going to say, listen, you got to do some physical therapy first, see if that helps. If that doesn't help, then he'll, take you to the next level, seeing a pain management doctor, an orthopedist, having an MRI done. That's, there's a process. And insurance companies are not just going to, if you decide that in 3 weeks you want to get an MRI, they're not going to pay for an MRI in 3 weeks. They're going to want to make sure that you go through what we call conservative treatment first to see if you improve. If you improve, then it's over. If you don't improve, then more likely than not, they will approve further testing and more invasive treatment.
And to your point, it's a process. Just let the process unfold. Just make sure you listen to your body and get in to see a doctor, and don't just say I'm fine.
Correct.
All right, well, that's it for our first episode of Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour. To learn more about his work helping injured people across New Jersey and beyond, visit GhabourLaw.com. You'll find resources on medical coverage, insurance claims, and what to do after an accident. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss another episode. Joe, great meeting you. Great having you here. Looking forward to continuing conversations.
As do I. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.